Welcome to Inside Aesthetics, the world's leading podcast for injectors and cosmetic businesses. I'm Dr. Jake Sloan, an aesthetic doctor based in Sydney, and I'm joined by my co-host and good friend David Segal, an entrepreneur and an aesthetic business mentor. Each episode of IA showcases unfiltered conversations with guests from around the world. In a sometimes disjointed industry, IA aims to help educate and connect our global community to raise the bar for both our businesses and our patients.
To further support and educate our listeners, we offer a range of additional resources under our IA Patreon subscription service. This caters for injectors and business owners of all levels and includes interactive live Zoom sessions, webinars, hints and tip videos, private chat groups, and exciting future content to come. To subscribe to IA Patreon, head to www.insideaesthetics.com/Patreon or click the link in our podcast description. You should seek medical advice before undergoing any treatment or procedure, and these podcasts do not replace a professional and bespoke consultation.
All right. How are you, buddy? What's happening?
Not too bad. Wednesday evening with the Awesome Foursome.
Awesome Foursome. We've got an interesting podcast today, and I guess just to sort of, before we dive in and sort of preface this conversation with the fact that I guess we're reporting on what would be considered a live, ongoing situation with some potentially dodgy things that have happened in our industry. And we're going to sort of remove specific names and dates and events to protect the innocent until proven guilty. But we felt that it was, I guess, incumbent upon us to talk about what's happening because obviously we're protective of our industry. And so maybe let's stop talking in riddles and tell people exactly what it is we're talking about. But it's an interesting one.
Yeah, well, let's introduce our guests first. So both have been on the podcast before. We've got Ian Carroll from EnVogue, and we've got Jahan Kalantar, who's the famous Netflix criminal lawyer. So maybe we'll go back to Ian first. Ian, do you want to introduce yourself again? It's been a while since you've been on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me back. So my name is Ian Carroll. I'm the managing director of EnVogue. We're a boutique aesthetic distributor, started in 2018. So yeah.
Fantastic. Yep. And Jahan?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jahan Kalantar. I am a criminal defense and I guess commercial disputes litigation lawyer and the managing partner of a firm called Executive Law Group here in Sydney. I've been representing and, assisting people in this space for quite a few years now. And it's a pleasure to be back on IA.
Yeah, well, you're like one of the regulars now. Whenever we've got a legal issue or a legal challenge, it's either yourself or your wonderful business partner, Clarice, that comes on and clears up the muddy waters of the legal world for us. So thank you very much for coming back on.
Well, thank you for making me a friend of the show, and dare I say it, a friend of you, Dave, and a friend of you, Jake.
It's our pleasure. Now, maybe we tell our listeners who are probably thinking, what the heck are they talking about? I mean, how did this all come about? And I think I'm going to go back to Ian for this one because I had heard some things from injectors who were texting me about various things, and I wasn't at an event that Ian's company was. So maybe, Ian, you could sort of paint a scene for us of what we're talking about.
Sure. So I think maybe in August, there was a fairly large event, an aesthetic event with healthcare practitioners attending. And a product was being discussed and promoted and so forth, that there was some rumors around its eligibility to be promoted, I guess is probably the best way of saying it. With a bit of investigation, it does seem that the product hasn't been registered by the TGA, but is still being actively promoted and possibly sold. So it's a completely unique situation, and the 20 years I've been involved in aesthetics, I've never heard of it. It's what we would consider a medicine, so it's got a very specific, quite a high level of requirement to get registered.
Yeah,
and I think the more we uncover of this onion, the more we realise that there's probably some fairly dodgy things happen. So
yeah,
right, and I guess. It's public knowledge. It's a filler product. It's a new filler from Korea.
Yeah.
We won't say its name, but yeah.
And I guess it's kind of pertinent because we are living, especially in Australia here, in a world that's had our industry come under the microscope of potential dodginess. We've got new regulations that came out on July 1 this year, which tightened the reins on how things were being done in our industry, the scripting process, the responsibility for doctors now that are providing scripts. And so we also, and I was just talking to you about this earlier, Jake, every time we hop on social media, there's someone sending you a message or trying to get onto your page to sell you a dodgy product, whether it be a toxin or a filler. And as our industry evolves and it becomes more popular and more people are taking it up, these sorts of things tend to be coming up more and more regularly. And now we've got a situation which looks like a product has now physically tried to be promoted and sold to healthcare practitioners and business owners in this space without the proper TGA approval. And that has a number of potential consequences and flow-on effects. And I guess that's sort of where we're at.
Yeah, and maybe just to clear up some nomenclature, the TGA is a bit like the FDA in America, or, other countries have similar sort of authorities. They are, the regulator from the health department here in Australia that sort of define what is approved, what's licensed, what's safe, and they're the people. And Ian, maybe you can sort of give us some information because, you run a company that imports threads and fillers and a few other things. So what's your experience with the TGA and how does it all work?
Yeah, look, I think the TGA do a fantastic job. I think they keep Australian consumers and healthcare practitioners safe. That, there is a fairly lengthy process on registering a product. It's 7 stages. The requirement on the manufacturer or the supplier of the products is to provide a dossier of product, and that ranges from, the clinical data, the safety data, side effects, the manufacturing process, and in some cases with filler, it requires a TGA audit. So physically someone will go to the factory and walk through the documents and so forth. It's an intensive process designed to analyze the product and make sure that what's on the label or what's being said is true.
Yeah.
It's quite an expensive process. I think around $150,000 to $200,000 in fees to get the product registered. But at the end of the day, people should be confident that they've got a safe product in their hands. And I think in this situation, they haven't gone through the process, or they're going through the process and maybe they haven't finalized it. So there is a risk, a genuine risk here. So, I guess that's where my concern came from originally.
Yeah. And just to flesh out what those risks look like. So, I mean, you alluded to the fact that it's potentially in the approval process at some stage and it hasn't been finalised, so it doesn't have its official stamp of approval, but that it's ready to inject. So I guess if we take that on face value and assume that it's true, we're probably dealing with a product that's come from Korea. I'm not going to talk about the name of the company, but it seems like it probably is a legitimate product, but someone has jumped the gun and tried to expedite this process for some sort of commercial business reason. Yeah. And so from my perspective as a business owner and someone that's run teams of injectors before, the questions that come to my mind, and obviously Ian would love to hear what you have to say, but also particularly Jahan from a legal perspective, is what kind of situation can unfold if you're treating a patient with a product that's not approved from like a healthcare practitioner's perspective. So if you're a nurse or a doctor, what repercussions could potentially land on your shoulders for administering a product that hasn't got that official approval. So you've got your regulatory implications. Number 2, what happens from a medico-legal perspective. So if you inject a patient with this product and let's just say they have a horrific adverse event, let's for the sake of argument, say it's a vascular occlusion which leads to blindness or stroke or something horrific like that, where does that put this healthcare practitioner because they have acquired this product under the assumption or after being told that it's all legitimate and approved. So they haven't done anything malicious, they've just been misled. So what's their sort of situation from a medical legal perspective? And then the third one, and potentially less obvious, but maybe it's sort of intertwined with the legal side of things, Jahan, is from an insurance perspective. And I know you're not an insurance broker, so you can't probably give specific insurance, but I guess we can use some common sense thoughts here to sort of unravel that. But for me as a business owner, and if I was an injector, those are the questions that would come to my mind.
I can't even remember question one. There's a lot to unpack there. Yeah. Jahan, go.
Sorry. Well, maybe Ian first, I guess, and then we'll go to Jahan. I mean, you're dealing with healthcare practitioners all day, every day, Ian, and you've been in the industry for a very long time. So do you need me to recap on any of those points, or you got it all?
No. I think I got it. I think when a new product comes to market, Australian healthcare practitioners, I think, have there's an expectation that it's approved.
Yeah,
we've never had this before. Actually, pretty sad indictment of that we've got to the situation where this product's maybe in this situation. But yeah, so I think there's an expectation, to your point, that this product's approved. It's in my hands. This person's talked to me about it. He sold it to me. I've paid money and so forth. From a regulatory point of view, I think it'd probably, maybe not the TGA, it would be the local health department. So New South Wales Health would have a problem with this because this product's being moved around. It's in a clinic. It doesn't have the proper registration. So that would endanger, I would think, and again, I'm not an expert in this, but I would endanger the poisons license of the person holding the product, i.e. the clinic. From a medico-legal point of view, I can only imagine that if it got to a court of law, this would be a huge problem, that, you're using a product that hasn't gone through a proper process. So a massive problem for an injector, I would think. And the third part of your question was?
Well, with insurance policy. So, I mean...
I think it's null and void, right?
I would think so. Yeah. But those are the obvious questions. I mean, what do you think about that, Jahan? I mean, have we sort of hit the major key points? Yeah.
I think so. Let's start at the back and work our way to the front. When it comes to insurance, the assumption you should have, and I say this, some of my best friends are in the insurance game. Insurance's job is to move liability away from the insurer. And any way they can do that, they will do so. So they will say, it's not my problem nor my concern that you used a product that doesn't approve or gel with the legislation. You should have known, even if it was impossible for you to know. And so I think you can safely assume that you'd be, up the paddle in relation to your insurance if you use a product that's ill-approved. I could be wrong. There are better providers, there are worse providers, but as a general proposition, I don't think it's unreasonable to say the way insurance companies make money is by denying claims. And so, that's perhaps a crass way of putting it, but I think that's a fairly safe assumption.
Yeah.
When I look at problems, I try to look at them through two lenses. One is the private tort side of things, the medico-legal. The other is the criminal side of things. Now, I think it would be a very dark day indeed if you, in good faith, used a product, caused an injury, and were charged by the police for that. But those things do happen. Okay? It's a possibility. It's unlikely, but it's a possibility. Thankfully, we've never had a case like this, which has come through, because these things are often only tested once they're in the crucible of real life and things are happening. And, but from a medico-legal perspective, I guess one of the questions will be, how much did you really look into it? How much did you know? What questions did you ask? And when it comes to regulators, they generally tend to be fairly unforgiving when it comes to questions of, I didn't know, I couldn't have known, I shouldn't have known. In this case, I think the regulator would have to accept that, hey, a lot of fraud took place, or alleged acts of fraud which perpetuated this, but it's just causing you headaches. And I think that one of the things that is so important is to be making sure that you're getting up-to-date information, making sure you're not taking people's word for it, and really making sure that you're getting your information from trusted, reliable sources, because that's sort of the challenge. You can't simply say, I didn't know, or I wasn't aware, because you could have been. It's harder in this case because allegedly there's fraud, allegedly there's misleading and deceptive, sort of conduct. It adds a whole layer to it that's very complicated.
Yeah. And what about, so we sort of covered I guess being criminally charged by a regulator, but what if the patient wanted to sue the healthcare practitioner for damages, which I guess is kind of like a separate area of law than being criminally charged by a regulator? So patient A comes in, gets a horrible adverse event that results in some sort of deformity or some sort of, inability to use part of the face because something happened with this unapproved product. Surely if you were the recipient of this damage, that you would be going after whoever you possibly could to be compensated. So maybe is it worth sort of just explaining the difference between, I guess, being criminally charged by a regulator or a government organisation versus being sued for damages by, just a Joe Blow off the street, or the patient rather?
You've done a very good thing, and you've separated it into three separate categories. So let's firstly think about, the first one is dealing with your freedom, your liberty, and your reputation. So that's the police charging you for some sort of criminal act, that you've gone and done something illicit or illegal. There would be charges that sort of fall under deliberately using something that you're not supposed to use on someone. I don't think they fall into this categorization. So I think the risk of that is fairly low, albeit not none. Then there's the second one, which is your right to practice medicine, and the regulator coming after you in that respect, which I think is, or, your ability to practice in the field that you've trained in, that has a higher risk, because the regulator can say, well, you put the public in danger. Notwithstanding the fact you didn't know, you still put people in danger. You should have asked questions that we would expect someone of your intelligence, capability, and competence to ask. So there's a higher risk there. And then there's the final one, which is, I'm going to get sued and I'm going to lose my livelihood and I'm going to be out a sum of money. And that really becomes a question of, to what extent did you know? To what extent could you have asked? And any competent medico-legal lawyer is going to be really going after you for the sake of, how could you not have known? How could you not have asked those questions? You are taking someone's, you're dealing with someone who's vulnerable. You're dealing with a patient. They have an expectation that you do things with a certain level of competence and skill. And you would be saying, well, I was misled, I was deceived, etc. It's a horrible, nasty situation. And from my perspective, look, I'm all for, I think regulations sometimes in Australia go too far. I think that in Australia, we sometimes are a bit of a nanny state. But I actually think in this space, particularly when it comes to making sure the stuff that we're using on people's appearances, on their in their bodies, I think the standard needs to be ridiculously high. We learned that with thalidomide. We learned that with Foundation 41. There's a reason that these entities exist, and they tend to be on the conservative side. They need to be, because the consequences are profound.
Yeah,
it's true.
I think we have an amazing regulator here. So we do have that high level of scrutiny. It takes 12 to 18 months for these products to be registered. It's not a quick rubber stamp thing. And to the point around, Jahan's point around knowledge of the product and, knowing if it's registered, it's the simplest thing in the world. You type in ARTG database or ARTG into a Google search, and you can search every single component of that product, the name, the manufacturer, the supply. It is very, very simple. But none of our customers ask for it. And maybe because they've never needed to. But I think as a take home here is that, if you're using a product, you're not exactly sure if it's registered or not, get onto ARTG, put a name in. It takes you 2 seconds.
Yeah, going back to what I was saying at the very start, I was actually contacted by Injectors well before this aesthetic event and well before this story happened by just curious injectors who had heard about the new filler maybe coming, and they said, is it approved? And I did exactly that, Ian. I just went to ARTG and I said, I don't think so, but maybe they've changed the name to suit the Australian market or, something else. Mm-hmm. So, I don't really care at the time because, it sort of wasn't here yet, but it's almost like the Swiss cheese effect, where everyone just assumed, well, it must be approved, so no one looked. That's sort of how it feels.
Talking about us.
Yeah. Well, we've never had a reason. I mean, we've only had a handful of providers of injectable products over the last sort of 20 years or so. I mean, there was the two big, Allergan and Galderma, and then obviously, Ian, your company's come on board, and there's been a few others as well. But we're not like Europe. We don't have like 100 or 200 fillers on the market. We've been a fairly small market, and I just think that everyone, rightly or wrongly, has just been under the assumption that if it makes it to market and they can buy it, that it's been through the process. So as you said, maybe this is a good sort of warning for people to, no matter what people are telling them is to just do your own research, because at the end of the day, you're the one with the needle in your hand. It's your business.
Absolutely.
It's the patient on your treatment bed. You need to take responsibility for it and check these things. So if nothing else comes out of this podcast other than people just being, oh my God, and this is interesting, is I need to make sure that I'm doing my own due diligence as a provider.
Yeah, I mean, the ARTG is really good. I mean, there's a couple of new things coming on the market, and, I'm looking into using some of them. And that's the first thing I did. I went to ARTG because, I was told it's either coming or it's nearly here. It'll take a week. And that's the official approval. It's approved because it's on the ARTG sort of website.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, Ian, I understand, and, maybe we'll have to edit some of this out. Hopefully we don't, is that some people asked for proof of the registration. And this is where the story takes another interesting turn, is that allegedly, don't sue me, is that apparently someone had put together a letter from the regulator that was falsified, basically, and made it look like it was a letter from a regulator, which then makes things even more tricky. And now we're talking then, we'll get your thoughts on that, Ian, then I'm sure we'll cross over to Mr. Jahan again, because I'm sure that the regulators don't like to be impersonated, so I'm sure there'll be some implications there potentially. But Ian, I mean, can you elaborate on that a little bit? I mean, have I sort of reported accurately? I know we're being very careful here.
No. Yeah, I mean, the conversations I had with this particular customer were around the thing of, okay, the product's supposedly approved. Can you ask the supplier for the ARTG certificate? Oh, yes, we'll go ahead and do that. They came a few days and they said, oh, here's the certificate. And I'm like, oh, great, that's fantastic. I was relieved to know that this, was available. And then it comes with a unique identifier. It can't be, you can't spell it wrong. It can't be, interpreted wrong. It's a 6-digit number. So I went onto the ARTG certificate database, pumped in the number, still no certificate. So they should match, basically. I went back to the customer. I said, look, as far as I can tell, the numbers don't match or they don't appear. So there was a bit of back and forth, and I think, I guess this is where we ended up in the situation was this customer received an email purporting to be from the TGA saying, yes, this product's approved, but we're behind schedule and we haven't posted this product on the database, which sounded to me very, very odd, because it's literally the same step. The certificate comes, it's posted online. It's alleged that this email was also fraudulent, that this didn't come from the TGA, and it was confirmed by the TGA. So it's kind of, where does it stop, really? Where does the deception stop? But that's where it kind of finished, and I've kind of pulled back from it. I know there's a few other things going on, but as far as I can tell, both those documents, the certificate and the email, were fraudulent. So.
And you called the TGA, or someone called the TGA and asked them to verify the validity of said communication.
Yeah,
and
I think
they
about 6 or 7 people have done it.
And then the TGA were like, what, WTF?
What are you talking about?
Yeah, okay.
But then, I don't know if Jahan can elaborate, but what does the TGA do then? Because they we're talking about it and we're trying to get information to sort of protect the public and injectors.
This is the $64,000 question, right? All of this just opens up an opportunity to show what the TGA will do.
I'll tell you a story that's about this, but not about this. Many, many moons ago, I represented a fellow who was he was addicted to substances he shouldn't be. And what he did is he went to a doctor's office. He took a script pad, stole it, wrote himself a bunch of pill scripts, filled up scheduled classes of scheduled drugs he wasn't allowed to have, took them, got in a car that wasn't his, drove it into the side of a real estate agency. Now, of all the charges and offences, which one do you think is the most serious? Ostensibly, you would think it would be I drove my car through a wall, but it's taking the doctor's script pad.
Masquerading as a doctor.
It's a big deal. It's a real big deal. And you are dealing with the feds. I wouldn't mess with the feds. Give me the state police any day of the week. I wouldn't mess with the feds. I would imagine the TGA has sent this off to the Commonwealth DPP, and you're going to have a bad day. And I'll just say that
I actually hope so. I do. I genuinely do, because I think this is something that needs to be investigated thoroughly, and it needs to be explained to the market. Or how did we get into this situation? So, and I like, we're on this podcast. We're not regulators. We're obviously involved in the industry, but we don't have the power to do anything. And I hope the TGA respond appropriately and hopefully quickly as well. So
yeah. So what I mean, you sort of alluded to very bad things, Jahan, but what are we talking about? Are we talking about jail? Are we talking like what? How bad could it get?
Let's begin with the assumption that under Australian law, you're innocent until proven guilty. There may be a completely valid and innocent explanation for all of this. There could be a series of horrible mistakes. There could be a hacker. There could be a million things, right? We can't point fingers, but ultimately, deceiving members of the public as to the efficacy and safety of a product like this, I cannot imagine there isn't some fraud provision within the scope of the criminal federal legislation that could be utilized. And the penalties in the system are severe for that, as right they should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask Ian, because you're a distributor. I guess if you were dealing with the TGA, you're called a sponsor, right? When you're bringing in product or indeed exporting product. So I'm just trying to understand, like, let's assume everyone's innocent until they're guilty. What were they thinking? Like, surely they couldn't have believed themselves that, oh yeah, it's just delayed on the website, but we're good to go. I mean, I'm assuming you would have never have done that.
Look, yeah, the risk is so dramatically big versus the reward. I don't think why you would even contemplate it. The only thing I can think is the driving force here is a commercial outcome. It's like, I think it's a good product. It looks real and it's packaged really nice. So I think it's going to be safe.
Yeah.
Oh, this process is, overblown and it's just a rubber stamp thing. And therefore I'm going to go ahead and sell. I don't know if that was the thought, but, that's the only logical thing I could think of why they would do it. But, it
seems like it would be very easy to get caught if this was malicious, presumptively malicious.
Yeah. I mean, and it has been very easy to be caught, because you go onto the ARTG and you're 2 seconds later, you've figured out that, okay, it's not registered.
Yeah. I mean, you deal with Korean, a supplier, I guess, and I'm sure you've got a good relationship and so on. But in the process of registering with the TGA, that's your job as the sponsor, correct? The Korean company supplying you with, say, your threads.
The documents.
They don't get involved with the TGA, or do they?
It's a partnership. So the manufacturer supplies the dossier, which is this 7-part process of the document. They obviously understand the manufacturing process. They understand all the clinical data. They've developed it and so forth. And then the local sponsor will work with a regulatory agency to submit to TGA, and they'd be kind of the go-between. But the initial document, this common technical document, is provided by the manufacturer.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I was just wondering, Jahan, from a sort of a legal perspective, can the supplier in Korea as well as the sponsor be in trouble here, or is it probably the sponsor?
No. It would beg a belief if that was the case. It's almost like I would liken it to the analogy of I sell you a stolen car, or what, and you blame the original poor owner who had no idea. It's just it doesn't. I don't think so. It could be, and the other thing is, look, it could be a very good product. It could very well be a perfect product that's suitable and sensible, but it hasn't gone through the tests and regulations. It's you might be a great injector, but if you haven't completed your training and gotten sign off, we shouldn't be allowing you near patients, and it's the same exact concept.
Yeah, I've got another question, and again, we won't use names, but I'm assuming this company or the sponsor of this filler would have had a medical director to be able to handle and hold product.
No, I don't. I think that with this situation, they have got a local regulatory agency as the kind of maybe the sponsor or the supporter of the application. No, I think small companies don't generally have a medical director. They might get like a consultant to support it, but on the payroll, it's pretty rare.
Right. I mean, again, speculation. I wasn't there, but I was led to believe that the product was sort of being shown and maybe even injected. So surely there was some sort of medical oversight from the company. But I don't know. I have no idea. And that's just something that I wonder whether that person might sort of be criticised for not doing their due diligence to actually, look, what is this product? What am I actually supplying and doing here?
This raises a bigger issue. And we will see a significant number of new products coming into Australia in the next 3, 4, 5 years, I have no doubt. And it's a good time. I think competition is fantastic. As injectors, the market needs to sit back and say, okay, what is this company? Where is their background? What is their credibility? Do they have a medical director? Do they have legitimate or credible people working for them? These are the questions that we should be asked, like injectors should be asking themselves. Not, I see a product, I see a price. And I think maybe part of that is how we've got into this situation. We're a small company. We do our best, but we're not perfect. And I think other companies are coming, and I think that injectors need to be critical of who they work with, who they partner with as injectors, and asking for the ARTG certificate, asking for documentation, asking for all of the clinical information and clinical studies and so forth, and really getting a handle on product, not just buying it because it's on a portal and it's got a price that's cheaper than what I've got now.
Yeah. I do wonder if, some of this mindset and this sort of lackadaisical approach to the way things are being done, have we kind of created that in some ways by, the commoditization of products, selling them as, lunchtime facelifts, it's easy. You've got people who are coming into the industry who have gone into this field of study with the pure intention of becoming an injector who potentially don't have that depth of knowledge and experience in a public hospital setting, the constant price war that's on. I wonder, this is potentially just a byproduct of the general attitude to our industry. I mean, what do you think about that? Is it a bridge too far, do you think, or do you think there's some validity there?
Look, it's loosely aligned, but I mean, this is sort of pretty serious stuff if some of these allegations are true.
Sure, but you've got to think, what would lead someone to believe they could get away with this?
Well, look, again, this is speculation. I don't know these people, and we only know, what a few people have told us. But, in their defense, not that I'm defending them, but I can only assume they didn't know what they didn't know, and they thought this was like importing lip balm or, something that's not a medicine. Right. I'm trying to see it from their perspective because to me it just seems so obvious. Like Ian said, that just a quick search. Like I said, injectors were asking me prior to this, is this thing approved? So it's not hard to prove that it wasn't, and so they were definitely going to get caught. So you can only assume that they were naive enough or something else to think that they wouldn't get caught. I don't know. Yeah. Or maybe they just didn't understand. It's different.
I kind of agree to you up to the point that fraudulent emails from the regulator.
Well, you don't know.
That's the point where I start to go,
Well, you don't know who supplied that. Is that a one malicious party trying to cover their own tracks? We don't know. This is all speculation.
It's an onion, isn't it? Yeah. Something that I was wondering about, and maybe you can answer this, Jake, and I'm not sure, Jahan, if this is your area, but I mean, I've seen doctors bring back products from overseas or go to a conference in Dubai or over in, Paris, and they'll bring a suitcase back full of filler. And I don't know where it ends up, but I'm assuming it's just not sitting there. And so do you know what the law is around people bringing products in and injecting that aren't approved under the, I'm doing inverted commas here for those listening, personal use? What does that mean?
So maybe Jahan can elaborate, but I did a bit of reading about this. And so personal use means for you or maybe your siblings or your wife, but, not prescribing it, not selling it, not making it commercial. as part of that sort of ring fencing of personal use, it can only be about 3 months supply. Right. So a small amount, basically. So if you're bringing back a suitcase full of filler or toxin, it's clearly not just for you, unless you're very sweaty or something else. But there are circumstances where, say, for example, pandemic is a good example, where, some of these, vaccines or other medicines, they are approved quite quickly, and so some of the rules were slightly changed, I guess, in exceptional circumstances. But also, let's say there was a shortage of a drug for, I don't know, cancer patients. You can get special approval for drugs that are available abroad, but not here in Australia. So for non-approved drugs, you can get, I think it's called a special access something like that. But you need to involve with prescribing doctor, and you have to go through a little process with the TGA. So you can't just basically load up in Dubai and come back and go, right, I've got this new stuff from Dubai, let's go.
Personal use Friday.
Yeah. Well, can you fill in the gaps, Jahan, and just, or is that correct?
Look, I don't deal with it on a day-to-day basis, but I have heard of special access. And, it does happen. Yeah, let's take a common, what's that weight loss drug that everyone's addicted to? Yeah, well, there's shortages here, right? So if you were to say that I need a 3 or 4 month supply, I can only source it from Canada or America, and I've got the relevant scripts. I mean, that's a terrible example because it's permitted here and it's under the relevant legislation. But you can under very specific circumstances seek that, but it's not a day-to-day thing that we deal with in our practice. And my advice would be very, very cautious. People are so gung-ho about new products and things. I think one of the reasons that in this particular market, and I've never been a practitioner, but I've represented many practitioners, is because we really have had that duopoly. And it really has been A or B, take it or leave it. Like, those are your two options. And now that there's all these other options, there's an excitement and a desire to, maybe I will get a better result. Maybe I can increase my margins here and there. But there isn't that deep knowledge of the two and how they work. And I think we need to educate ourselves, which is number one. And two, just double check things, right? If you're not a double checker, hire a lawyer. That's what we do. It is staggering to me how many times people will come to us after the fact and go, I didn't know, I couldn't have seen. It's like, well, it was pretty easy. You just go into the search portal and put in the 6 numbers. Like, I think you need to write a very large check now because, you're a qualified health practitioner. You've gone to university, you're educated, and you didn't have enough sense to do that. Maybe there's an issue.
Yeah, I think you said at the very start, David, I get WhatsApps, emails, Instagram direct messages on an almost daily basis from some random company, and it always looks dodgy for multiple reasons. But one, that's how they're communicating to sell me drugs. It's through a WhatsApp or something similar. But what scares me is that clearly someone's buying it because there's a market for this stuff because it's so common. It happens every day, right? So, if you're an injector listening, can I just implore you? I know it might look tempting to, like Jahan just said, to save some margins and use some cool new stuff, but it clearly is dodgy just from everything about it. And, you can't speak to someone, you can't see someone, you can't visit the factory, you can't see a premises. It's all through WhatsApp or a message, and it's very, very dodgy.
Well, we get half a dozen of those, to a dozen of those companies following our Instagram, and we're constantly removing them, they just keep coming up. It's like whack-a-mole. You get rid of one of them and 5 more of them come back. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
The most devious side of that is, you get an email or a WhatsApp and it's products you've never heard of, and you go, okay, never heard of it. It's probably more risky, so I'll do it. The worst ones are, you can buy product that you use every day. You can buy the leading toxin. You can buy the leading dermal filler and so forth. So I assume that's seen as less risky and more likely to be purchased. The issue with this is you have no idea where that product was manufactured. I've worked for a large company in the past, and we found our syringes being refilled with silicone or God knows what else. So it looks perfectly fine. packaging is immaculate. The syringes are actually literally the syringes because they've been given, after they've been injected. And you think you're injecting the product that you've got in your cupboard at the moment. It's registered. I've got less risk. The reality is sometimes it's real and sometimes it's God knows what else. So that was a point to, these injectors are thinking, I'm just buying what I've already got. Well, you don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah. What is quite scary, and maybe our listeners in the UK and Europe are probably thinking, I do that all the time. In Europe, parallel importing, or I think that's what it's called, is very common. It's just normal almost. And there's multiple online and sort of aesthetic pharmacies where you buy your stuff from. And, you don't go through the supply like we do here in Australia. So I think this is a very Australian-centric story in some ways, because in other countries it just works totally differently.
Yeah. I kind of wonder as well what kind of implications this kind of stuff could have for our industry. So if what we are talking about goes through the legal process and it all comes out in the wash that what we're alleging or reporting allegedly happened did actually happen, Ian, I mean, where do you think this sort of potentially places us as an industry? Because, we're all sort of stakeholders here. We all want a safe industry. We want a good reputation. We don't want more over-regulation and rules that make life difficult and unnecessarily cumbersome for business owners and injectors. And so that's the thing that worries me. And I read your Facebook post on this, and that was something that came through loud and clear from you was, the concern for the reputation of the industry and where this might land us if this sort of all unravels. And so yeah, keen to sort of flesh that out with you a little bit and get your thoughts.
Yeah. Look, I think there's a positive side to this, is that we've never experienced something like this, and it's an opportunity to communicate to the market that it can happen. We've discovered it can happen, but hopefully we've given you some of the tools now to check. So don't take everything at face value. Ask a few more questions. I think we all benefit from that as an industry. I am genuinely worried that though, we've had quite a bad run with the media and aesthetic medicine in the last year and a half, 2 years. And rightly, there's some terrible things that happened. And, sometimes we call ourselves, or we've been called, a cowboy industry. This kind of just reiterates it. And, from an injector point of view and a practitioner point of view, we've had some issues. Now we've got suppliers acting like cowboys. And maybe there's a need for the suppliers to be regulated a little bit more, held to a higher regard or higher standard. So my hope is that this is a benefit and we all learn from it. My worry is that, we won't. But yeah, who knows what the future holds. I certainly don't think. I think hopefully we've caught it in the bud, and it's not something that's going to turn into a bigger issue, and the media can work around that. But yeah, it's pretty sad that it's even got to this stage.
What do you think, Jahan? What do you think the regulators got up their sleeve for us?
I think that most regulators think the solution to problems is more regulation, right? I mean, that's the bureaucratic solution to almost every problem, and it's concerning, and it's hard because 99.99% of practitioners, suppliers, all do the right thing. It's this small element that exists in every ecosystem that gives everyone a bad sort of name. And so I think that I think that there needs to be a greater depth of understanding, and I think that there's huge value in education. The stuff that you're doing is priceless, teaching people what they need to know in order to do their job correctly, because it's not just having some abstract idea. You need to know that there's a database that you can type 6 letters in, 6 numbers in, and get the information you want.
Yeah. Ian, I don't know if you've got a solution, but, as injectors, and David and I were talking the other day, part of the regulations now are we're supposed to give our patients, like the insert from the filler, like I guess the expiry date, the batch number, et cetera, but that's sort of meaningless unless it's a real batch number and a real thing from a company, right? So can you foresee a system where you can just scan a barcode and you're like, yep, that's legit stuff, let's go? Or no,
well, you know what? I am super lucky to be working with the only product at the moment, or that has had like a QR code. It's a QR code on the box. It's a QR code on the syringe. It's literally take a photo of it and it verifies the manufacturer, the data manufacturer, the batch number and so forth. And you can, once it's scanned then it can't be scanned again. So it's like, this has been scanned, you can't reuse it.
Right.
So actually, I'm really lucky that we've got this level of technology in our product. It works really well. I think the more practitioners know about it, the more patients know about it. And I think this is a question of patients as well, is, okay, you've injected me with this product. I trust you because you're the practitioner. Let me see it. Let me see the syringe. Let me see the box. Let me see the insert. And these patient implant cards are really, really powerful things. I think it gives you more information. But there is technology that suppliers can implement to verify that supply chain.
Yeah.
I can't talk to any other product, but I know the one that we work with has that technology. It's fantastic.
That's amazing. I didn't actually know that. So that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say as well, something else to think about is not only the immediate potential adverse event that might happen from injecting a product that happened to be not approved, is what happens like in a year's time. You get a nodule, something that happens later, like you have no company behind you to support you through this process. So, I've been a clinic owner for, 10, 15 years, maybe more. And not often, but occasionally you'll get a patient that comes back with a delayed onset nodule, or they get some sort of allergic reaction, or you've got something weird that happens. And when you're dealing with reputable companies, they're generally a phone call away. They can't be too helpful. They get their medical affairs team involved, their clinical side of things. And it's, you sort of got a support network around you to try and get to the bottom of this. So it's not just the immediate aftermath of potentially the adverse event. It's these products, when now learning, particularly HA fillers, are, they're lasting many more years than what we've been told. So they're hanging around, and the problem just isn't immediate sometimes.
Yeah, that's why I like working with big companies, and sometimes injectors go, oh, it's really expensive, and I'm going to go for the lowest common denominator and get the cheap one. But you have the backing of, like you just said, the whole apparatus of a global pharma company who's done their research. They've probably seen these things before. They know what to do. They've got protocols, and if shit hits the fan, they've got legal teams and other things. So I feel like when you buy a product, it's not just the product that you're buying. You're buying the support and education, everything else that comes with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, as injectors, we need to make a bit more sensible decisions about why we choose products, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
you're definitely not going to get that off of a product that you buy from IG.
No. Well, you never know. You could WhatsApp them and get some WhatsApp advice. Come on in.
No doubt. They'd be very, very responsible and reply to you immediately. No doubt.
Yeah. If you were the business owner, then let's throw you in the ring here.
Oh, good, yeah.
And your hotshot doctor said, hey, this new filler's amazing, let's get it in. And then suddenly you found out this story happened in your clinic. What would you do?
I'd fire everyone. No. So the product's been injected into a patient, or it's just ended up on the shelf?
Yeah, and then your friendly competitor company owner says, oh, hey, that stuff you've got, not approved.
Yeah. I think I would call my friend Jahan.
It sounds to me like you're coming scarily close to a scandalous allegation, Jake, and I would be very concerned that you would speak to my client in that tone. We will be responding in a fulsome way in 14 days.
I can't hear you. I'm taking my earphones off now.
And then we'll...
Get him, Johnny. Get him.
Yeah. No. It's a great question. Yeah. Right. It's a great question.
I think. Yeah. When in doubt, I call your lawyer. Basically, I think the first thing to do is just get advice. So get all the facts as best you can, document them, get legal advice. That's the first thing that I would do is talk to a lawyer. that understands this area of the law, and then from there be guided on what they think the most prudent and sensible approach is moving forward. So, maybe you voluntarily go to the regulator and say, this is a situation, this is exactly what's happened, full transparency, get the product off your shelf as quickly as possible. If it's been, has it been injected to a patient?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many times.
I think I'm going beyond what I've just said. I'm going to divert to my learned colleague over to my learned colleague over there.
Well, I think transparency would have to be the way, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you'd have to play with your cards open and say, look, this happened. The reason we've bungled it, we've messed it up. Here's what we've done wrong. Here's how we plan to fix it. Da 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 da.
Yeah, and presumably you've got to be honest with your patients, let alone the TGA and the lawyers. You've got to tell everyone.
Yeah. Well, what would the patient, if there isn't a adverse outcome which would potentially result in a damages claim? Where are you placed there with that, Jahan? Sorry.
Well, it's irrelevant really whether whether there's an adverse effect or not. There have been. You've used something on them that you're not allowed to use. The fact that it didn't have a catastrophic outcome is less pertinent. I was reading today about a story, not about this, but about this. It was a young woman who was pretending to be a doctor on TikTok, and she was giving out health information. And notwithstanding the fact that her health information was correct, she wasn't a doctor. She couldn't have had that authority. I think you'd find yourself in a similar sort of grounding here.
Wow.
Not good.
Can I ask, let's say theoretically David does place that call to you, this is all live and happening. What do you guys do in the background? How long does it take you to go and do your research and sort of form some sort of strategy? Yeah.
Well, I think that like many things in life, Jake, I guess it's a triage type question. So sometimes David will call me with something that is purely academic, and I'll get back to you when I get back to you. Sometimes it'll be something that we think is academic, which is live, and sometimes this is DEFCON 1 type stuff. Like, hey, I've injected a client with a product that's illegal. We know it to be illegal. What do we do? I think you drop everything that you can conceivably drop, and you get, you start going through the bits and bobs. It's uncharted territory. So uncharted territory, you give yourself the right to take a little bit longer. Some things may seem like uncharted territory, but happen with regularity. Like, for example, notifications to, the registry that, hey, I was drink driving or something like that. To the person, they're all a shock. We deal with those on a fairly regular basis. But we were misled through, if we take this story and accept all of the allegations as being proven, we were misled by someone purportedly providing us documents that bore the TGA's mark. They gave us repeated assurances. We went to a website before, we may have gone to a website that they sent us with a link, which was a false link to the TGA. I don't know how far you take it. I think the regulator will be okay with that. They won't be okay that you did it, but that it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's very, very different than, nah, man, some guy hit me up on Telegram, shot me a box of these syringes, and I just started jabbing them in people's faces. There's levels to this.
Well, joking aside, presumably there are people doing it because these things are so frequent, these messages. So what is the situation if, you get caught doing that? Like, what is even, what's the offence called, and what are the likely sort of fallout of that?
Look, it really depends. It could be one offence. It could be a number. It would. Every case runs on its own merits, right? So I don't want to speculate on the range of offences it could conceivably be. A few jump out at me. It's grievous bodily harm to inject something with something that's potentially poisonous or incorrect. Like it's serious stuff, and so we've got to make sure that we just deal with these things, and more importantly, it's the reputation of the particular clinic, that doctor, and that practice. You only get one reputation, and people are generally pretty forgiving of mistakes made in good faith. What they won't accept is a cover-up, and nor should they.
Yeah, fair.
Any thoughts from you there, Ian? I've been watching you sort of watch this all unfold.
Scary situation to be in. Yeah, look. I can't comment anything legally. I just think I hope that nobody's found themselves in this situation.
Yeah.
And I think, it's more likely people have found them in the situation with products they've bought through Telegram or IG and stuff than this specific situation that we're talking about. But, because, there's figures that I've heard, 15 to 20% of the market is this black, grey market and stuff like that. So it's a lot of injectables.
Is this global you're talking about?
Yeah.
Is it Australia or global, that figure?
Global, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah. And I think in Australia, it's probably, I would suspect it's at least that. I think because of our pricing and the way that things have gone, I think it's probably more attractive to Australians to look at these kind of products.
Mm.
We're not talking about 1 or 2 syringes here. I think we're talking about a significant amount.
Yeah.
And remember, these products can be purchased by anybody. It doesn't go to a doctor, doesn't go to a nurse, it can be bought by a beauty therapist, it can be bought by anybody. It's such a dangerous area.
Anyone with cash can get a product, basically.
Actually,
anybody with cash.
Probably what's most scary is, and this is why we've got to be careful with how we educate people, including ourselves and our Patreon and social media. It could be consumers buying and injecting themselves. Forget clinics and injectors. So it gets even more complicated when a non-doctor who can't be have their medical license taken away because they don't have one is potentially setting up and maybe not just injecting themselves, injecting others. I mean, how far does it go?
Yeah, let's not give people any more ideas.
I know, it's terrifying. I mean, like, what can the law do, Jahan, for these, let's call them dodgy pharmacies or dodgy suppliers? I mean, what do we do if I come across one or someone WhatsApped me? What do I do with that?
Look, the good thing is, if you're in a profession of which we are, holding yourself out to be a professional when you don't have the expertise, the law has offences for that, and substantial ones. I liken it to sort of those backyard. The more scary examples of those backyard tattooists, right? That were quite popular in the 90s, where you just got a tattoo gun and you just went to town on people. There's serious penalties for impersonating a medical professional, and there's very serious penalties for something like injecting someone, because the catastrophic consequences of vascular occlusion or causing a clot or any of these other necrosis, it's profound. And so the law recognizes that fairly well. If someone, I think one of the things that perhaps I was unkind about, and I don't want to be flippant about, people do make mistakes. And if anyone on this listening to this has made a mistake, they've purchased something they thought was lawful and hasn't, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to chat off the record, and give you some honest advice on the next steps. I don't want people to feel like they're trapped or add more pressure to them. Mistakes do happen, genuine mistakes, especially if you're misled. But as a general rule, the neuroticism is a good thing. And for many people, I would be surprised if, this Telegram or this Instagram group says I can get this product and I can inject it into a face. I will. It's unlikely, but, I've seen stuff that would shock me. So
literally just now.
Oh, you just got an ad. There you go.
On Facebook Messenger.
There you go. I must have heard you talking about
and
them.
I've got their WhatsApp number, but I won't read it out.
You should.
It's
Well, I mean, so this sort of situation is sort of unfolding, and I don't know if we've got too much more to add to it today, because we've got limited information and we're sort of making assumptions and alleging things, and it's a bit of Chinese whispers. So I think that we'll sort of let this play out, and then maybe we'll report back and sort of do a follow-up to this episode when we've got some more details and we've got some more confirmation on what's actually happening. But I guess just sort of the take-home messages for people listening to this would be, always proceed with caution. Never assume that a product that's being sold to you or potentially being marketed to you is legitimate. You have to take responsibility for any product that ends up in your hands or in your clinic. So as a clinic owner or as an injector, if you do have a situation that you find yourself in, as Jahan said, get in contact with some legal support, whether it's him. And, we do have a partnership with your firm, Jahan. So if anyone wants to reach out,
go to insideaesthetics.com/offers.
Yeah, and you get 10% off any of your legal fees if you do need to get in contact and get some support. But whether it's Jahan or someone else, get in contact with a lawyer, stay calm, don't make stupid, impulsive decisions and sort of do things that you haven't really thought through or don't have advice on. So be cautious, be sensible, take and get good advice, I guess would be the take-home message.
And just from an Injectors perspective, whilst we kind of moan in Australia, we often feel like we're left behind and we get stuff years later than any other country. In a funny way, that's the greatest problem ever, because we can learn from everyone else's experience. And, the great thing about things like social media is we can reach out to our colleagues across the globe and ask them, is this stuff good? Is this bad? Tell us about the complications. You can reach out to the company. And, as much as, Injectors have got their own skill level, etc., I think it's up to everyone to also push themselves and learn themselves and ask questions themselves, rather than relying on your clinic owner or your medical director. It's also you who's injecting it. So ultimately, we've all got that responsibility. But thank you, chaps. So I thought that was a really interesting conversation, kind of a bit of a strange run in a way, spur of the moment, because this is sort of, as we say, it's live and happening. Yeah. But maybe we'll do a part 2 as things unfurl.
Keep us updated, Ian, with what you hear. And you seem to be the man with the info, or one of them. So keep us posted.
Yeah, I don't know how I ended up in that situation, but I'll do my best. And
Jahan, potentially we will call for your counsel and opinions and advice once again, as we seem to do with monotonous regularity.
No, it's always a privilege. You guys ask the right questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
For our latest news, follow us on Instagram at Inside Aesthetics Podcast. If you want to get in touch with myself or David, follow us on Instagram as well at Dr. Jake Sloan and David_Inside Aesthetics. Join our IA Patreon platform for invaluable business and injectable education. Get access to our global community of like-minded professionals, live and interactive Zoom sessions, hints and tip videos, webinars, and more. Head over to www.insideaesthetics.com/Patreon for more information.